King 5 News.
We begin tonight with big news in Seattle's race for mayor. King 5 is now calling the race for Jenny Durkin.
Now, at this point, she has a big lead with 61% of the vote. Let's listen in live as she speaks.
So last week, I was in South Seattle at the senior center, and I met a woman named Jewel, who's 94 years old. So she was alive when Bertha was mayor. She's lived in this city for decades. She's lived almost 2 lives. But today, Jewel can barely get by. I sat and talked to her, and after she pays her rent and her expenses, she only has a few $100s left. And she talked to me about how hard it was, but how much she really had faith in Seattle. So I want to tell you, Jewel, if you're watching this, help is on the way. You know, I've been thinking a lot about Bertha and that glass ceiling. And when we had the Year of the Woman, you know, they gave us a year. I remember going to a conference and someone said, you know, the first people through that glass ceiling, they get cut. Yep. Well, did you notice they named this big drill after Bertha? 94 years later, it was all Bertha's fault when it didn't happen. Do you just imagine what they're going to blame on me 94 years from now? So I will be honest, running for office is not for the meek. But my mom, Lolly Durkin, she did not raise her 8 children to be meek. She raised us to be fierce and gentle. And I tell you, everywhere I went in this campaign, I knew that is Seattle, because we stand fiercely for what we believe in. But when we see our neighbors hurting, we will also be gentle, because that's the kind of future that we will build together for Seattle, fierce and gentle. And so in this time of Trump, are we going to be fierce? Yes! And for our neighbors in need, are we going to be gentle? Yes! And we have a lot of people hurting now, but we know that if we come together as a city, if we pull together, we can tackle those challenges. We can build that better future, that better Seattle for the next generation. Now, the other thing that Mayor Landis was quoted as saying is that she thought Seattle was not really a city, but it's really only a larger home. So that's how we have to think of Seattle. We have to build it as a place where everyone has a home. A place where people are united, where people know they have a place, where we are a city that will be equitable and inclusive, and where every person, regardless of their race, their gender, their faith, their economic status, there is a place for you in Seattle.
They're giving her speech in front of many of her supporters there. Chris Daniels will have more a little bit later.
Chris Daniels with the Durkin campaign. We do go to Natalie Swaby now. She is with the Carrie Moon campaign. Natalie.
Yes, and right now, Carrie Moon is still in the room. She's been hugging supporters and telling this crowd here tonight that this is not over yet. They are not accepting defeat. They say that their race has been up against some tough odds. They say Durkin outspent the Moon campaign by more than 3-1. But the reason why they say it's not over is they are really counting on Seattle late voters. They say those late voters may surprise everyone. They say they believe ballot counts will swing in their direction over time. Take a listen to some of what Carrie Moon had to say a bit earlier tonight.
Seattle voters won't let the future of our city be sunk by status quo thinking and politics as usual. There's too much at stake. We look forward to the next few days of ballot returns, and thank you all so much, and let's celebrate together what we did.
And right now, live, you can see she's waving goodbye to the room of supporters here, and a room that's still filled with people who are optimistic and waiting to see what the numbers show in coming days. Live in Seattle, Natalie Swaby, King 5 News.
And again, that was Natalie Swaby covering Carrie Moon there.
So let's get to our political reporter, Natalie Brand, and our analyst, Marco Lowe.
Yeah, we've been analyzing the results, and even though we heard that Moon is not conceding tonight, King 5 has called this race earlier today, the Moon campaign, saying that they would be happy with a number 45 or over. She performed under that. At this point, we've called the race.
Yes, you just don't see a path where she's going to be able to overtake Jenny Durkan. She will definitely narrow. She'll probably get to 45 or even cross it. She's not going to get over 50%.
And I have to say, I expected this race to be closer based on talking to voters and, you know, the tough fight and the interesting electorate that Seattle is and has become.
I expected a much closer race than tonight. This was surprising for her to, on the first ballot, be under 40%.
And before we send it back to the desk, one more note that, you know, the work for the next mayor really begins tomorrow because they are going to have to transition into office much earlier than expected. I know you were writing about this earlier. They will be sworn in November 28th once results are certified.
3 weeks to hire up a mayor's office, get your department directors in place. It's going to be hectic.
And quickly, how many people are we talking about?
40 people in the mayor's office, another 20 directors. It's going to be busy.
All right, we'll send it back to you, and we'll talk to you very soon.
Okay, Natalie, Marco, thank you. Let's turn to the race for King County Sheriff. Veteran Deputy Major Mitzi Johanknick is going up against incumbent John Urquhart.
So at this point in what some might call a surprise, Sheriff Urquhart is trailing Johanknick by 10,000 votes. So this is going to be one to watch as all of these votes come in. We'll keep you posted. In the race for Tacoma's mayor now, former Tacoma Urban League CEO Victoria Woodard is leading over businessman Jim Merritt. Right now, Woodard has 52% of votes and Merritt has roughly 48%, as you can see here. Let's move now to the race for Everett's mayor. It's pretty close. Right now, roughly 49 votes separate Judy Toohey and Cassie Franklin. Coming up at 9:30, you're going to get live reports from the mayoral races in both Tacoma and Everett as well.
And now to the race for State Senate District 45 in eastern King County. Candidates are looking to replace Republican Andy Hill, who passed away last year. The district includes Woodinville, Sammamish, Duval, and Kirkland. Democrat Moncadingra is currently leading over Jinyoung Lee England, 55% to 45% of the vote. And our Heather Graff is following this race, and she joins us live. Heather.
Amanda, certainly a celebratory atmosphere here at the watch party for the Democratic candidate Moncadingra, who spoke to supporters just a few minutes ago. This race has been widely watched. It will determine the balance of power in Olympia, and it is a race in which Moncadingra is now leading. Here's what she had to say just moments ago.
Respond with love. We respond with integrity, with honesty, and a commitment to solving problems together. And these are not values that are bound to any particular party or identity. These are values that we as members of the 45th and as Washingtonians and as Americans believe in.
And this race is also the most expensive in the history of the state legislature. And since it looks like Moncadingra will maintain the lead that we saw in tonight's early results, tonight she also thanked her opponent, Republican candidate Jinyoung Lee England, for a hard-fought race. She told supporters tonight, when she left the stage, she said, the results are in, and this is what democracy looks like. And the crowd just erupted in cheers when she said that. And then when she left the stage, her campaign manager came on stage and said she had to go to take a call from former Vice President Joe Biden, who had called to congratulate her. He had supported her in this race, and that just gives you a sense of just how watched this race was. People across the state and across the country even paying very, very close attention. And again, if the results we're seeing right now hold true, it looks like the Democratic Party will now have complete control in Olympia, in the governor's office, of course, in the state house. And with this win in the 45th district, it looks like they will also get control of the state Senate. That is the very latest live tonight in Woodinville. Heather Graham, King 5 News.
Okay, we want to check back in with Natalie Brand and Marco Lowe. Guys, we just heard Heather's report. What's the biggest takeaway from all of this that we just heard?
Well, I can tell you I just received an email into my inbox from the DNC congratulating Manka Dhingra. Even though I checked in with the England campaign, she's not conceding tonight because a campaign spokeswoman told me that later votes were actually potentially favoring her, although that goes against what we've seen conventional wisdom, later votes being more progressive. In this district, there were still a lot of later voters, independent-minded voters, so maybe the numbers shift around a little bit, but it looks like Dhingra will likely hold a comfortable lead in this race.
Later votes in the primary favored Dhingra, and this is almost the exact number we finished at in the primary. So it's hard to make the case that we're going to see a comeback.
In terms of what it means bigger picture, as we were discussing earlier, because this was a special election, the winner is going to have to run again in 2018. So there's another tough fight ahead just around the corner, and that could mean that, you know, there's not as much movement on extremely different progressive votes and pushes in the legislature next year.
The incumbent protection plan for Dhingra started about half an hour ago and is going to be a very moderate direction for her.
Okay, but it does mean if she holds on to that lead that the entire West Coast is blue when it comes to state governments.
Correct, and you will see more progressive legislation coming out of Olympia immediately.
All right.
I just want Marco to weigh in on the tone of this race. It got incredibly negative, especially as we got to the end. Did you find that those negative ads swayed voters one way or another?
You know, with $8.5 million spent, it's hard to argue that they did if it still stayed locked at 45-55. So I would say, as nasty as it got and as much money as was spent, it looked like a governor's race. It didn't sway many people.
And I have to say, I mean, that's a product of so much of the outside money coming from out of state, and also the fact that this race is really just an early start to the next race that will happen next year.
Okay. Natalie, Marco, thank you. We'll be checking in with you later on in the hour. So now let's turn to the race for Seattle City Attorney. Incumbent Pete Holmes is running away with this one. He's got 73% of the vote. Scott Lindsay with 27% of the vote. And King 5 is calling this race for Pete Holmes right now.
We're watching two Seattle City Council positions right now, and position 8 is to fill Tim Burgess' seat. Teresa Mosqueda has the comfortable lead with 62% of votes, and this is over John Grant. And now, Seattle Council position 9, Lorena Gonzalez is leading with 68% of votes over Pat Murakami.
The first results are in. And let's get right to the biggest surprise so far tonight. Incumbent King County Sheriff John Urquhart trailing his challenger, Mitzi Johanknecht. She's leading by some 10,000 votes.
I look forward to the next phase of votes coming in. I think that we'll continue to trend in the direction we've been going, and we're pretty excited that at the end of this we'll be in office.
Good evening, I'm Lori Matsukawa.
And I'm David Espinosa-Hall. There are hundreds of races being decided tonight. We can't touch them all, but we're scrolling results right at the bottom of your screen during the show. And of course, we're going to have complete results on our website, king5.com, and also the King 5 app.
King 5 has declared Jenny Durkin the winner in the Seattle mayor's race. She has a 21-point lead over Carrie Moon after the first set of returns.
King 5's Chris Daniels is with the Durkin campaign tonight.
Good evening. Definitely a festive atmosphere at the Westin Hotel in downtown Seattle. The music that was playing over the speakers just before Jenny Durkin walked into the room, Beyonce, Who Runs the World, Girls. Yes, Seattle will have a female as mayor of Seattle for the first time since 1926. Jenny Durkin did not want to absolutely positively declare victory tonight. She said there were still a lot of votes to be counted, but she noted the history in the room. There were at least 3 former Seattle mayors here, as well as dignitaries in the city of Seattle. I did see one former Seattle City Council member, Jan Drago, on stage openly weeping about the history being made here tonight. As you likely know, this is going to be an interesting transition for Durkin. She's going to have just a few weeks waiting until the results are certified before she officially takes over as mayor. Here's what she had to tell me about what that transition is going to be like.
You know, we've been thinking about this since I got in the race, and we'll have a team in place, but we're not going to try to do it all at once. We will have a transition that is orderly, that makes sense, and it's not just going to be change for change's sake. We're going to make sure that as we make these changes, they're all about one thing, and that is making progress on these really tough issues and seizing the opportunities. Seattle's a great city, and we're going to make it even greater.
Durkin talked a lot about Bertha Knight Landis, who was mayor back in 1926. If you've been to Seattle City Hall, you know that a room on the first floor is named after Bertha Knight Landis. Jenny Durkin will be assuming the top floor now at City Hall. That's the story here in Seattle. Chris Daniels, King 5 News.
But challenger Carrie Moon is not declaring defeat just yet. In a statement tonight, she said she's holding out hope that Seattle's late voters will surprise people.
Seattle voters won't let the future of our city be sunk by status quo thinking and politics as usual. There's too much at stake. We look forward to the next few days of ballot returns, and thank you all so much, and let's celebrate together what we did.
Political reporter Natalie Brand is with Seattle University professor Marco Lowe, and they are breaking down the race.
Guys, any surprises in this race?
I think the margin surprised both of us. It was larger than we anticipated.
Absolutely. 55-45 would have been a big spread for me tonight.
So King 5 has called this race. Marco, you have been working in mayoral offices in the past. Take us through the transition period. Obviously, this is an expedited transition that we will see.
You've got a 40-person mayor staff. You may make changes in the policy and budget shop, and every director is up for grabs. So it is going to be a sprint to fill those spots, and I think you may see people stay in place longer and then make decisions down the road.
Thinking across campaign season, Jenny Durkin made very specific promises and attached numbers to some of those campaign promises. 1,000 units of micro-housing, certain dollar figures attached to her proposals, free college tuition. So talk us through what is realistic. What do you think we're going to see in this first few months or year?
So first of all, she tied dollars, as you said, to all of this, and I think she had good help from budget staffers that knew what they were talking about. So nothing was crazy. I think she'll be able to deliver it. Also, Seattle is on an incredible upswing economically, so money is pouring into the city, so there won't be a lot of cuts to make this happen.
We will be watching more races to track. We'll be back with more analysis in just a little bit.
All right, and now to the most expensive legislative race in state history. I'm talking about the special election for Senate in the 45th District.
A lot of outside money pouring in, some $9 million all told. And at this point, Democrat Manka Dhingra is comfortably ahead. Here's Heather Graff.
The party is starting to wind down here in Woodinville, but Democrats here tonight certainly feel like they have a lot to celebrate after that first drop of results shows the Democratic candidate Manka Dhingra with a big lead in this race that will determine the balance of power in Olympia. And I had a chance to speak to Manka Dhingra a little while ago about what a win in this special election in the 45th District would mean, not just to her, but the Democrats across the state and really across the region.
You know, from a regional perspective, I think this is where I talk about environmental issues. I think making sure that the governors of all three states are committed to working on protecting our water, our air, and this will give them some leverage in doing that.
And tonight, Manka Dhingra thanked her Republican opponent, a former congressional staffer and entrepreneur, Jin-Young Lee England, for a hard-fought race, which is now officially the most expensive race in state legislative history. If this lead holds, it would mean the Democratic Party will now have complete control in Olympia, and that's in addition to Democrats already in control in Oregon and California. So many have said a win here in the 45th District would give the Democratic Party a sort of blue wall stretching along the West Coast and the ability to band together in opposing policies that might be introduced by the Trump administration. So we will wait for the final results, but right now, Democratic candidate Manka Dhingra feeling pretty good about what she's seen so far. Reporting tonight in Woodinville, Heather Graff, King 5 News.
And within the last 30 minutes, Jin-Young Lee England tweeted, "Want to say a big thank you to everyone who has supported me these last 6.5 months. It's been a long road with its ups and downs, but I am humbled and grateful for friends made and experiences shared. There are still a lot of votes left to be counted."
So we are back breaking down this race. Now keep in mind, as we've been mentioning, the winner of this race, if Dingra's lead holds, it will be her. She will have to run again in 2018 because this was a special election. So given that, and an upcoming election, Democratic priorities in Olympia, what do you think happens next year in terms of what gets passed?
I think you will see a more progressive agenda. There's been a lot pent up with the Republicans holding on to the Senate, but at the same time, they want to keep this seat and other close seats. So you'll see incumbent protection plans that really do keep a moderate hand on the rudder as we go forward.
I know you were getting messages and texts from national political consultants. Talk about why Washington State is on the map nationally.
This is a mini version of Virginia. A lot of money came in here. It was a purple district that could go either way. And in the wake of the Trump victory last November and his policies since then, they're trying to take the story to the next level of he is hurting the GOP and will in the 2018 elections.
Seen as a bellwether for next
Absolutely.
year. All right, we will keep watching. We'll get back to you in just a little bit.
In the race for mayor in Tacoma, former Tacoma Urban League CEO Victoria Woodard is leading businessman Jim Merritt. Right now, Woodard has 52% of the votes. Woodard served as a council member for 4 years. Tonight, she told King 5's Jenna Hanchard about her goals to create affordability and opportunity for all of Tacoma's citizens.
Up every day and going to work and doing things that make this city a better place for everyone who lives here.
And it's a virtual tie in the race for Everett's mayor. Just a handful of votes separate Judy Toohey and Cassie Franklin. The race right now is really too close to call. King 5's Eric Wilkinson spoke to both women tonight.
Really did think it would be close. After the primary, things went back and forth, and we anticipate both teams did everything they could do in the campaign, and this is not a surprise.
I hope the campaign we ran in the last few days, honestly throughout the whole campaign, is working to get a broader demographic out to the polls, out to vote. Folks that traditionally haven't felt represented in our community. So if they came to the polls, they turned in their ballots, I think we'll do well.
Check in now with Natalie and Marco. What do these early results mean for these cities?
Very tight margins here, and what's interesting to note about this Everett race, there is a significant number of votes going to a write-in candidate. The Herald was reporting about 10%. That's unusual, yeah, Marco?
Incredibly. Breaking 1% for a write-in is incredibly hard to do. 10% shows there was a block that did not feel represented at the ballot, and they took their votes elsewhere.
What does this, we saw lower turnout in Everett. So again, we've been talking about what this means for the Everett electorate and the evolution of Everett as a city.
Everett's changing, going from a Boeing Navy economy to Funco and other companies there. It's also just an off-year election, and it's hard to get voters really jazzed up to go out and vote. So we're seeing that.
And turning to Tacoma, and the environment played heavily into this race, with a key difference between the candidates in that race.
Liquid natural gas plant at the port was a really hot button in the race, and we see the leader being a supporter of that on the jobs message and that it was a transitional fuel.
Those are races that we will have to keep watching in the days to come because, as we noted, they are at this hour just too close to call. We'll send it back to you, Lori and David.
Okay, now let's check out the race for Seattle City Council Position 8. Teresa Mosqueda has a comfortable lead with 62% of the votes over John Grant. And for Position 9, current City Council member Lorena Gonzalez holds a wide lead over challenger Pat Murakami.
So the next round of returns will be released sometime tomorrow afternoon. And actually, we're hearing it will be released right around 4 p.m. We're going to have those results live on King 5 News starting at 4.
Keep track of the races that interest you. We'll be scrolling results at the bottom of your screen throughout this program.